Hello, I'm David Cruz. Welcome to the program. With me in studio today, Lorraine G. Woodwark. She is the Director of Attorneys United for a Secure America, working with Immigration Reform Law Institute. Lorraine, welcome to the program.
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me.
What is the kind of work that you do?
Well, I work for the Immigration Reform Law Institute, and as director, I recruit attorneys across the nation to help us on our litigation and holding our government officials, our politicians accountable.
Your organization and you specifically as an expert are considered one of the foremost voices in holding corporate America accountable. What does that mean?
What that means is a lot of times corporations don't just get a pass when they're breaking immigration laws, and we want to hold them accountable as well.
So let's take one of those examples. Let's say what happened in Mississippi. Right. We've got hundreds of workers who were arrested or detained in a series of raids. We understand that they were detained because they were here without proper documentation. All right. What happened to the corporations?
Well, we don't know if they've been held accountable or if they've been fined. I mean, I think they ought to have their ill-gotten gains forfeited.
So the aspect of a corporation hiring workers who don't have documents, you're saying that that's a responsibility at both ends, the worker and the employer?
I believe it is both, because what happened last week, 234 illegal aliens were picked up, and a day later, the Koch Food processing plant had a job fair, and hundreds of Americans showed up to get jobs that we'd been told for years they didn't want.
I was not aware of that. So there was a subsequent job fair, and those positions were filled, and the corporation continues.
That's correct.
Well, I think the dilemma that some Americans have is, okay, we understand that the workers may have broken the law. Okay, as it stands on the book, immigration policy. But aren't corporations also accountable in terms of they should be held more responsible for not doing their job and, let's say, checking their documentation, or they're making profit off of these individuals?
They are, and they should definitely be held responsible, and they shouldn't be getting, ill-gotten gains by hiring low-wage workers when they could be hiring Americans.
Do you believe that the wages of this nation then are being kept low because of this cheaper labor?
Yes, it does, and it creates a domino effect. More Americans have a harder time, especially our lower-skilled Americans who can't get work, and the corporations are, basically cheating the system by hiring cheap labor without any proper documentation.
I'd yet have to hear of one corporation, well, no, there is one, Waste Management in Houston, Texas, got slammed with a $5 million fine. They did experience what you referred to as the asset forfeiture. Right. But that's about the only case that I'm familiar with. You don't see a lot of that in this country. Why do you suppose?
Well, I think I would like to follow the money. If we do, we'll see that a lot of politicians and our government officials and maybe some judges are all financially benefiting, maybe through political contributions or who knows what. But I think that's part of the reason why there are not more corporations being punished.
Well, I'll tell you that it is a fact that there are more millionaires in Congress than ever before, and they didn't go in there as millionaires.
No.
We also know that the lobbies are very, very strong, and right now the lobbies for these corporations are actively, in there each and every day in the halls of Congress asking for support. So if the politicians are the ones who are not giving us some solutions, what do you think we as Americans ought to do?
Well, we ought to be protesting our government. We ought to be showing up. We ought to be complaining. And I know there are groups of people that do that, but more Americans need to. We also need to be filing Freedom of Information Acts, and that's what we do at our organization.
Explain what that provides you when you file what's called a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request. What does that yield? How does that work?
What you do is there are guidelines to filling out a FOIA, and we basically look for pinpointed information, such as, how many illegal aliens are actually benefiting off of social programs instead of Americans, and finding out where's the money going and how is it being used? Is it being used properly? So we do find that information once we get it back, and sometimes we have to sue the government agency to get that information.
One of the reports that I saw, and I want to get back to the issue of corporate America accountability, but one of the reports that I saw and shared with you says that in the first generation, we do find that there are immigrants, those who may not even have documents, who are here, who do receive benefits. Now, in the second and third generation and beyond, what this report indicated is that the give back by their children and their grandchildren is greater than the usage of those benefits. Do you believe that?
No, I don't. I actually looked into those reports you sent me, and a lot of it is speculation. In fact, some of the reports even say they project. So that means they're not actual hard evidence.
So you don't see that there is a contribution being made by the immigrants who are coming into this country?
Are we talking about illegal aliens or actual immigrants?
Well, I think that it would have to be all-encompassing, because I don't know the difference between one and the other. They're both working.
Well, an illegal alien is somebody who's broken our entrance fees. We have no idea what their background is or why they're here. Whereas an immigrant comes here legally and through the documentation. They've also proven themselves to not become a public burden, and they will be contributing to society. And that's the standard we've had since 1882, when the first laws were enacted on who can come to this country.
Do you believe that, just look around this county, let's drill down to where we live.
Right.
We look around our agricultural fields. Mm-hmm. You think they're all documented?
I would hope so. Well, realistically, probably not everyone. And I think...
So why aren't we doing something about that?
Yeah, that is follow the money. Maybe those companies, those agricultural fields, are contributing some large sums to somebody's pocketbooks. I don't know. It's a shame, because Americans get harmed when that happens. Well,
let's look at the businesses that feed so many higher paying jobs here in Ventura County.
Right.
Health.
Right.
Education. The car business, the insurance business, all of these companies profit off of the immigrant, whether they're documented or not. No one asks you, are you documented when you buy a car?
No, but they probably should, to make certain that this person has the resources to pay for the car. Otherwise, that gets stuck on the consumers.
Half of the vehicles sold in Ventura County are being sold to Latino immigrants. My point is, are we really seeing a population that is sucking off of the system, or are they contributing to the economic vibrancy of this community?
Well, when it comes to Latino immigrants, there's lots of Latino immigrants that come here legally. I've met people from Mexico who came the right way. There's no issue with legal immigrants. The illegal immigrants, where are they getting their money from? Are they actually paying into the treasury for the government so that we can have services that we need for all Americans?
Well, now we do see, and there is a track record on Social Security. I'm glad you mentioned that, because annually there's about a $13 billion contribution being made by immigrants into Social Security. We're talking Latino immigrants, and many of them never claim any of those benefits because they can't. What do you think should happen with that money? Who should it go to?
Well, I believe that's kind of a misnomer one, and I looked at that article and I clicked on the link, and it actually had nothing to do with illegal aliens. So that's one problem with your article.
No, you believe that then undocumented immigrants don't give anything into the system?
They may very well give a little bit, but I don't believe it's to the point where it's a plus. It seems to be a negative balance.
Okay. You also mentioned that the remittances made by this population is a concern to your organization. Why?
Well, it's a concern to all Americans. That's $150 billion with a B going to other countries, including Mexico, and that benefits those countries where it should be going back into the economy. When you put money into the American economy, more people get hired, more businesses can open up, and do well and
so
profit.
Let me ask you this. If they're sending $150 billion and you say these are illegal aliens working in the U.S.,
right.
where does that money come from? You say that they're not probably working as much as what they're getting back, but they're giving $150 billion, and they must keep some money to live here. So where do you think that money's coming from?
A lot of that money comes from working under the table, getting paid cash, but then at the same time they're using social services and public benefits. The others times they're using somebody else's Social Security card.
So when you say that these individuals are sending back $150 billion, what should we do with that money? Should we tax it? Should we stop it? I mean, what do you think we ought to do?
Well, for one thing, the banks need to be held accountable because when money is sent to Mexico and South America, there is no fee to send that money. The banks waive that fee. So I find that unfortunate. That's money that could be put back into the American economy. So that should be a starter.
I wonder if you would hold the same view of corporations that are based in the U.S., but have figured out the tax code system and show their profits in Ireland, like Google, like Apple, like Facebook. You have an Apple phone. I mean, my point is, and I have a Samsung, so just in the interest of fair disclosure. So, I mean, I too am buying a phone that's not made here in this country. But my point is, you say $150 billion goes out of the country, but these corporations now that are profiting from the American consumer, they're also siphoning off their profit, and they're doing it to avoid taxes. In fact, dollar for dollar, they're paying less than you and I do in taxation, percentage-wise. How do you feel about that?
Well, a corporation is a separate entity, but the people who work for corporations are all paying taxes and contributing to the economy. So, I mean, if you tax the corporation and you tax the workers, that makes the price of the cost of goods even higher for our consumers.
Okay, so let me move on and ask you about, you feel that the workers who are here without documents are causing wages to be depressed and that this leads to exploitation. Explain to me what that means for you.
What happens is it takes away from the competition. When an employer has to pay a minimum wage of like $15 an hour, but they can hire an illegal alien for $7 or $8 an hour and not have to pay for Social Security and all the other items that a regular American worker gets taxed in their paycheck.
There must be a lot of companies, in your view, exploiting workers right now, huh?
Well, I don't know how many companies are doing it.
Well, but you say that these workers are getting paid $7 to $8 an hour, and clearly, I mean, this is not the wage that they should be paying. They're not contributing to their Social Security.
Right.
They're working them off the books. Clearly, there's a lot of companies breaking the law. What are you doing about that?
Well, we need to find out who those companies are. So if the public knows about it, they ought to be contacting us and saying, "Hey, these companies are benefiting by hiring illegal aliens instead of American workers."
But the system as it's set up right now enables an employer to see a card, and they may or may not check it. They may or may not really verify.
Right.
They may not do the e-verify, or they found another way to get around it.
Right.
So isn't it really that it's convenient to wink, wink, keep the worker as long as they can, then when the raids occur, say, gee, I didn't know?
No, there needs to be more corporate responsibility, and there are the Labor Department does check I-9, so if you're a small employer or you're a large employer and you're not keeping your I-9 records, if you get audited, there's some serious consequences, and yes, you should be held accountable.
You know, I can't think of another analogy other than this one. When law enforcement is trying to solve a problem, let's say of human trafficking,
right,
they go after not simply the people who are being victimized,
right,
including the trafficked individual. They also go after the person who's preying on them and the person who is, if you will, forgive me, pimping them or using them for profit. Is there enough being done to look at the entire spectrum of immigration so that we are all compelled to come to the table and we have to find a solution because it is not profitable to have an undocumented worker, albeit they've broken the law. But besides that, it won't be profitable anymore.
Right.
I wonder, are we having that kind of a conversation, do you think?
Not yet, and it goes back to our government officials and our politicians.
What do you mean by that?
Well, our politicians and our government officials make the policies, and then they either enforce them or they don't, depending on how well they benefit. They're not working for the American people, and we need to hold our government accountable.
You've said that several times in this interview, and I respect that. And so I want to ask you, how does your organization do that? How do you hold them accountable? Or do you think it is your work to make us aware, and we will do the work?
No, it's twofold. What I do is we recruit attorneys, and we file litigations, or we file amicus briefs, friends of the court.
Yes.
And we go ahead and we argue on behalf of the American people, because the American people want fairness, and it's human nature. And so we fight on behalf of the American people because we've seen our government fail Americans decade after decade.
This weekend, there was a caravan that arrived at the border, another one. And there were American citizens trying to get back from a relief mission they had done from a church down in Tijuana. Right. They were in line 15 hours. What does that tell you about what's going on along the border?
Tells me that we've got a lot more work to get along the border. We need to have finish that border wall, and we need to start really enforcing the border. It sounds like Congress is not doing its job. That's what it comes down to.
You believe the wall is a solution?
It's one of the solutions. It's not an end-all, be-all. We need effective enforcement of immigration laws. We need a border wall. We need accountability of large corporations who have been benefiting off the sweat labors of illegal aliens that people, we don't know. I think there is no 100% solution to immigration, but we can if we start making steps towards doing what I just said with the border wall and enforcing the law.
Let me ask you, there has also been a proposal made that the children of people who came here and brought them as, well, I say children, now they're grown. Some of them are grown, they're adults. But they came here as minors. And my question is, what do we do with the dreamers?
Well, that's a big question. Part of it, they say, we can't separate them from their family. Well, a lot of it is their family is actually in their home country of origin. In fact, a lot of their relatives are still there.
Are we talking about the unaccompanied minors or the? I'm talking about the ones
DACA and the DACA. Okay, well, for the DACA. Their parents broke the law. They're the ones that should be held accountable. And if the kids, or when they were kids and they came here illegally with their parents, they should be holding their parents accountable and should not be blaming the American system or Americans. And that's unfair to everyone, including minorities that we have in this country who are here as citizens. So that's
so these
point.
These then minors who are still in the country, many of them now are in school, many of them are working. I'm not talking about offenders. I'm talking about people who have made their way since being brought here. What should we do with them? There's 800,000, maybe 900,000 of them. What do we do with them?
Well, some of them have been breaking the law, and they haven't been held accountable. We've had some cases where we have sex offenders, we've had murderers, and not all those unaccompanied minors were as a pretty a picture.
No. I'm not talking about the unaccompanied minors.
I'm sorry about the DACA kids.
The children who came,
or
with
their families.
So those who are not offenders,
who have not committed crimes since being here in the United States.
Right. What should we do with them? Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of opportunity. For the first and foremost, the training and the education that we've invested into them, there's opportunities for them even to return back to their home country to benefit their own home countries.
So you would send them back?
Maybe, maybe not. It's not up to me, but I think that there are some policy discussions that need to be made.
Okay. So kind of sum it up here. You feel that Congress and the people who claim to advocate for the migrants are directly responsible for the human toll. So how do we start this conversation in America at this time, going into an election, when neither party is sitting down with you, with me, with the American public? I mean, we look at Pelosi, we look at Schumer, we look at, both sides of the aisle. We don't find that interest in some bipartisan solution. Where do we go?
Right, when our politicians are financially benefiting and the American people are being harmed, there is accountability. And that's where the Attorneys United for a Secure America comes in. We need more attorneys to sign up and join us, and we also need donations. And this is together we can actually push back on it, and we've made a number of gains over the decades, and including this year.
As you look out as an attorney and you've been involved in this kind of public service, and we thank you for that work that you've done to focus on such an important issue in this country, is this problem solvable?
I think in the long run, in the long term, it is solvable, but we need to have that conversation, and we need Americans to find out the truth of what's really going on, and when that happens, good positive changes will happen.
I was reading an article just this week about the Iowa farmers and the dilemma that they face. And I've talked to people in other parts of the country, in Colorado, for instance, not enough workers. You say that if you put up a job fair, people will come. Why aren't we seeing the labor force coming out to fill those jobs at present? These farmers are saying they need workers. What's going on?
Well, I'm not sure what's going on with them, but maybe they need to be holding a more advertised job fairs, or maybe they ought to be asking the government to reenact the Bracero program. So if they really aren't Americans...
The guest worker program.
The guest worker program. It was from 1942 until about 1964, right. I believe.
Which would be a very practical solution to a very real need. That would be people who come here as workers for a fixed period of time. They have to abide by certain guidelines, and then they go back. Is that correct?
Right. It's fair. Americans are protected, and the migrant workers who come here temporarily are protected as well, and that's not happening now.
Why do you think it isn't happening now? Same answer?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Our politicians...
I feel like we're in a cul-de-sac. We keep circling back to the same response.
Well, I believe they are the root cause of all the problems we have. We have judges who aren't abiding by the law and are making it enforced. We have politicians who have become corrupt, and we have our government officials who have been corrupt as well.
In Ventura County, and here in the Central Coast, Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, is there something that we in our community can do to be more fully engaged and more involved in the processes that we're a part of? Because let's face it, this is a topic that affects everybody from the time you're a child to the time you're a senior. So what can we do as Americans living here in the Central Coast?
Well, there's plenty that Americans can do. You can become actively involved, or you can even, if you don't feel that you've got time to go to these public hearings where your county and city governments are operating, then you can go online, you can submit complaints, you can address, you can contact the Immigration Reform Law Institute and ask that, are you interested in filing a FOIA to find out information? So
have your voice heard in whatever way possible.
Right, and that's why we are here.
Well, Lorraine, I would like for people to know how they can reach the Attorneys United for a Secure America. What's the best way for people to locate the work that you do and maybe get some ideas on what they can do?
I have two websites.
Okay.
The first one is the Immigration Reform Law Institute's website, which is irli.org. And the second one is Attorneys United for a Secure America, which is ausamerica.org.
I love that. Okay, so the first one, ladies and gentlemen, the Immigration Reform Law Institute. Just go to irli.org, and then the Attorneys United for a Secure America, ausamerica.org.
Correct.
Lorraine, again, thank you so very much for being with us today. I guess as a closing thought would be, look forward for me a decade from now. Where do you think we'll be? If we really get busy and do the things you're proposing and encouraging and urging people to do, where could we be in a decade?
In a decade, we'll have an even stronger economy. I think with a border wall and more enforcement security, countries that surround the United States will also benefit economically because they'll be able to get a control over their own governments as well.
I want to thank you for being here in the studio with us. I appreciate your time and all your thoughts and ideas. And ladies and gentlemen, just want to encourage you again, the website is irli.org, irli.org, or ausamerica.org, ausamerica.org. Thank you again for listening. We'll speak again soon.